A lot of people ask me about my right hand technique because that's a lot of what I'm known for, and that's what drives a lot of rhythm. So the right hand for me has everything to do with the attack. When I'm playing, I think of my right hand down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. It's kind of a motor that's just chugging along. And it just, when I decide to hit the strings, it doesn't matter, like it basically defines what my picking pattern is. Some people ask me about like, oh, when do you do downstrokes? When do you do upstrokes? Anytime it's a one or an and, if it's a number or a downbeat, it's a downstroke. If it's an E or an it's an upstroke. I never think about my picking pattern because it's always this constant motion. If I'm doing 16th notes, as far as if I'm running a 16th note motor, it's always going to be 1E and a, 2E and a, 3E and a. So I never have to think about strumming pattern or anything. My hand is just always going. And then it's just, when do I hit the strings? So the motor's always running. It's always going in full 16ths, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. It's just, when do I hit it? So it's... whatever. The whole time, my hand is still doing 16ths. Whether I'm hitting the notes or not, the motor's always running that way. And that way, it keeps my time a little more consistent. That's what seems to work for me. And a big part of the nuance and the feel then comes from the left hand. So I feel like the left hand doesn't get enough credit because if I was just doing my right hand, you're gonna get sick of hearing that. The right hand will do now the exact same thing, but I'll change my left hand. So my right hand is still doing the exact same thing. The left hand brings all the nuance. So that being said, the right hand actually, once you get the motor down, makes things pretty easy, and then you can focus on your left hand. Again, it's just the same thing. Crossing genres, I still use the same technique. Still just a motor on the right hand, or right hand is still doing the same thing. I'm just doing different voicings and a completely different feel because of some of the nuance in the left hand. That being said, there's some times where the motor is always going down, up, down, up, down, up. Sometimes I'm hitting more on these strings, sometimes hitting more on these, changing that sort of thing. But it's all that sort of thing. And to me, I've gotten to the point where the main thing I practice for that is metronome practice. Imagine that. It's kind of the classic practice with a metronome and your time will be better. And that's fun. That's easy to say. But sometimes the practical application of practicing with a metronome is kind of hard because to me, there's actually two sides of practicing with the metronome. Most people just think you can play with a metronome or you can't, which I guess to some degree is true. But I kind of look at it two-dimensionally when I practice with a metronome. There's either A, you have the technical facility and the chops to play in time, and you have the facility on the instrument. And then B, you have the mental awareness and the focus to be able to lock in on what 120 beats per minute is. And that to me is the part that not a lot of people talk about and not a lot of people focus their practice on, is just mental awareness. So an example of having one and not the other is, the person that practices a ton has a lot of technical facility on the instrument, but when they get on the gig, they get super excited, and all of a sudden 120 BPM feels like this. Or it's like somebody who's really tired, and all of a sudden 120 BPM feels like this. So the mental awareness thing is something that people should practice a lot and that I've spent a lot of time honing in on. So when I'm really excited or when I'm really tired, it doesn't matter. 120 BPM is objectively 120 BPM. No matter what my heart rate is, that tempo is still the same. So, and then the opposite side of that is, for me, I'm able to play along with the metronome on the guitar because I've played long enough and I'm a professional guitar player and I'm supposed to be able to play in time. But if you were to put me on the violin or a trombone, my mental awareness of time would still be there, and I would know every time I'm not nailing a 16th note subdivision, but I just wouldn't be able to execute on the instrument. So if you think about your metronome practice two-dimensionally, it will actually help improve you, I believe, a lot faster, because then you can hone in on, is the thing that I need to practice the actual technical facility on the instrument, or is the thing that I really need to practice my mental awareness? And I think the easy thing to practice is the technical facility. And there's tons of videos and articles out there about how to get that sort of thing. And that's really fun. That's great. That is one of the aspects. That's where you see the most obvious growth as a musician, being able to actually play the chord shape, being able to play the scale, that sort of thing. But the thing that takes it to the next level, and there's more levels after this, but the thing that takes it to the next level is understanding and having the awareness of time. So a practical way that I like to practice the mental awareness, the focus on time thing, is, of course, with a metronome. So you can see here I have some metronome app. I don't even know what it's called. But I just set it to 120 beats per minute, right? And what this does is it gives me accountability on every quarter note. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. And I can play along with it. I'll balance it on my leg. Turn down a little bit. Great, that's fine. Practicing along 120 BPM. Every quarter note, I have accountability. Every time a new quarter note comes around, I have some frame of reference on whether I'm a little ahead or a little behind. So every time I hear a click, I'm trying to pay attention. Am I hitting a little bit before it, a little bit after it, or right on? The next step for mental focus is to then take away half the accountability. So now I'm at 60 BPM. I'm still, my hands and the technical facility is still at 120 BPM, but my mental focus has to double because now I have half the amount of accountability. And because most of the music I play is groove-based music, I like to think of the metronome like the snare drum on 2 and 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Lost balance, but kept the time. So, half the amount of accountability, but my hands are still doing the exact same thing as when I had every other beat. And then the next step from that is to give yourself even less. Just now we're at 30 BPM. Maybe if I don't cross my legs, it'll have better balance. So now I'm gonna put this on beat 4, just for fun. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So my hands are still doing the exact same thing, but I only have one click every measure to let me know if I'm in time or not. And then whenever that one happens, it allows me to just make these micro shifts in my timing to to know whether I'm a little bit ahead, a little bit behind. And again, it's just about awareness. So for me, when I have a certain level of accountability, I think in my mind, because I'm of the grid generation, we grew up seeing the grid in Pro Tools and in Logic and that sort of thing. And we've listened to music that's been made to a grid, which for better or worse, whatever. There's some music that's recorded to a metronome that's amazing, some that's soulless and lifeless, of course. But there's also music that's been recorded not to a metronome that's soulless and lifeless. It's about the intention and creativity and artistry of who's playing it, right? So when I think about playing in time, if I have every level of accountability, in my head, I'm still seeing, I'm a grid guy, I see the 16th notes go by. And if I take half it away, I'm still seeing the same grid. There's an example of I don't have the vocal chops to be able to keep up with the 16ths, but I knew I was behind. I started to drag a little bit. But that's kind of how I'm approaching seeing time, hearing time. And again, it's all about awareness, so that way I know. And then when I practice with the metronome, my timing, it gives me a better understanding of how to play with other musicians, which of course is the most important thing, and how to lock in with a drummer. What's the drummer's subdivision feel? Are they playing a little on top? Is the hi-hat a little on top, but the kick and snare are right in time? Or does the hi-hat drag a little bit? Does the snare pull back a little bit or pull forward? Does the bass player feel time behind where me and the keyboard player do? Some of those things, the more I have an awareness of timing and awareness of subdivision, it allows me to lock into the groove much better. And some of that push and pull, the paying attention of each other in a rhythm section is huge. So if everybody is listening to each other, hearing how everybody's subdividing, everybody can make these micro adjustments. So at first a song might start like this, and then if everybody adjusts, it'll be like this. You know, like, oh, we're feeling subdivision like this. Everybody moves a little bit, and then all of a sudden it can line up, which is awesome, because then once it is lined up, it just has an insane groove, an insane pocket. Now, that being said, kind of the next step from there of awareness of it does and being able to play in time and on the grid, that's great. That's fun. But that doesn't mean that your music is all of a sudden going to be much better and it's going to feel better. A lot of times there are songs that feel better if they're right in time, right on the grid. Some songs feel better if they're pulled back a little bit, playing a little bit behind the beat. And there's certain styles of music that feel time a little bit behind. There's certain styles of music that feel time a little bit ahead. And it kind of informs the emotional impact and the way that a song feels by the way the subdivision and the time is. There's a lot of music being made right now that's felt a little more behind the beat, and that's cool. And it's something that like people seem to be exploring right now in certain genres, where it's like trying to play with the snare being way behind on certain beats, or like the kick and snare being in time, but the hi-hat being way behind, something like that. Or also like in some music that has a lot of angst to it, it feels better to push it forward than to be right in time. If it's right in time, it feels very, maybe it might feel a little militant to some people, but if it pushes forward, it might feel like it has a certain angst, or it might feel, if you pull it back, it might give it a little more relaxed feel, even though it's a fast tempo. So it doesn't always have to do with tempo. The feel is where something sits in the time. And that's a fun thing to explore. And again, it all comes down to awareness. So certain people like music that feels more relaxed and played behind. Certain people like music that's felt ahead. Certain people like music that's felt right in time. And that's okay. I don't think one is any better than the other. It's just once you gain that awareness, you can kind of gain a better sense of the way that you play, the way that you feel music, and the people around you as well.